online event van Statistiek Vlaanderen. We organiseren het deze keer online, net omdat we een buitenlandse spreker hebben. En dat is uiteraard makkelijker dan het fysiek te doen. We hebben deze editie georganiseerd als een gewone teamsvergadering. Dus het grote voordeel hiervan is dat iedereen zelf het woord kan nemen. Het nadeel is dat er wel een aantal afspraken nodig zijn om alles vlot te laten verlopen. Dus daar willen we zeker vragen om de microfoon uit te schakelen allemaal. Uw camera mag voorlopig nog aan, we zijn niet met te veel, maar als u dat liever hebt, mag je de camera ook uitschakelen. Wat willen we doen met onze maandelijkse seminaries? Wij willen eigenlijk altijd de kennis over de kwalitatieve statistiekproductie en verspreiding binnen ons netwerk stimuleren en coördineren. En daarnaast willen we Statistiek Vlaanderen op de kaart zetten en dat zowel binnen als buiten de Vlaamse overheid. Concreet proberen we heel veel diverse onderwerpen aan bod te brengen. Dat hebben jullie hopelijk al gezien in al onze voorgaande seminaries. En daarnaast komen op de seminaries experten van binnen en buiten het netwerk Statistiek Vlaanderen aan het woord. Ten slotte zijn de seminaries niet alleen gericht op de statistiekmedewerkers van de Vlaamse overheid, maar op iedereen die interesse heeft in verschillende aspecten verbonden aan kwaliteitsvolle productie en verspreiding van openbare statistieken. Vandaag hebben we dus een buitenlandse spreker en ook buitenlandse gasten. Vandaar dat ik nu terug naar het Engels zal overschakelen en ook de presentaties zullen in het Engels doorgaan. So welcome again. The remaining part of this seminar will be presented in English. The seminar will be recorded and published on the YouTube channel of Statistics Flanders. Before we start, may we ask you to turn off your camera and mute your microphone. You can ask questions by typing them in the chat box or raising your hand. Then me or I or Peter will give you the floor when you have some questions. So I think most people who subscribed are in the meeting right now. Today, our main presenter is Marek Cierpial-Wolan. He is director of the statistical office in Staszów, Poland, and supervisor of the Guide to Service and Studies on Cross-Border Areas. He will tell us about the Polish statistical initiatives to monitor Ukrainian refugees and cross-border studies. Marek will divide his presentation into two parts. After each part, there will be some time for questions and discussions. But if you have an urgent question, you can always raise your hand and interrupt, and Marek will give an answer or try to give an answer. Before we start, I would also like to welcome all attendants, but especially Liudmyla Momotiuk, who's attending from Kiev in Ukraine. Liudmyla is a PhD in finance, DSc in statistics, professor and vice rector of the National Academy of Statistics, Accounting and Audit in Ukraine. She will share some of her thoughts about the situation with refugees from Ukraine during the presentation of Marek. So I hope I've introduced our two speakers a little bit for you, and then Marek, I think you can start sharing your presentation now, and you can start. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And so it gives me the greatest pleasure to be with you, to share our experiences when it comes to this tough task. So what I want to talk about today is why developing a coherent research system for transborder areas is extremely important, especially in the context of unexpected shocks, like escalation of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and long-lasting, long-run migration crisis or COVID pandemic. So I divided my presentation into 5 parts. The first 2 points concern the research system for transborder areas, for transborder processes that are used for monitoring of cross-border flows, what is extremely important now. Then I'm going to speak about escalation of the conflict and the need for new approach. And after all, I'll give you an overview of demographic scenarios based on the Prost model I'll give you some details concerning this model. Of course, I closed my presentation with drawing conclusions. So, some kind of introduction, I can say that during the transition period, we noticed huge scale of movement of people and expenditure connected with it, especially close the European Union's external border. We suspected that these processes might have important implications even for national accounts. It was the reason why a few years ago, together with National Bank in Poland, these comprehensive surveys were launched. As you can see, we've noticed this process is a long time ago. What is important is we use this system for monitoring movement of people from Ukraine. Developing a coherent research system, we can distinguish, as you can see, through interlocking part, delimitation, monitoring, and comprehensive survey. The first thing which should be done is of course delimitation. Why is it important and how to do it? So please have a look here. In the time of escalation of the conflict, it is important to distinguish between refugees and people who cross the border many times because of shopping, going to work, but the stay in the neighboring country usually does not exceed, for example, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. Of course, dynamic delimitation and multi-criteria delimitation is solution in this context. It means systematic analysis of social economic phenomena in this area and environment. And for example, we can use data with geo-coordinates on, place of purchase, place of residence, place of work, data on the use of tourist accommodation establishments. All these four criteria together form some kind of final delimitation. So now it's time to explain why I'm here. Because as you can see, two regions in Poland have the border with Ukraine, that Podkarpackie and Lubelskie Voivodeship region, it is on the NUTS level 2. And so my office is responsible for preparing some kind of methodology and survey for whole country when it comes to trans-border or cross-border processes. So comprehensive surveys, as I mentioned, are extremely important part of coherent research system. So the scope of this survey in my country consists of two modules. The first one comprises survey at the European Union's external and internal borders, including, as you can see, questionnaire survey at the borders and the vicinity of the borders, as well as traffic intensity survey only on the European Union's internal border. So household survey constitutes the second model of this coherent research system. It also requires innovative data processing, it is clear, enclosed big data sources and data modeling to get final estimation of key variables. So in the framework of this system, we worked out an original trip and expenditure estimation model that use various sources of data, what you can see on this slide, including traffic sensors, web scraping, among other things. What is important, we prepare this solution in international team during Big Data 1, Big Data 2 projects, well known in in the European Union, in Eurostat to be exact, and of course we developed this solution now in the ESSnet WIN project. So I can stress that that for monitoring of movement of people, this sensor data are extremely important. At the end of 2019, Poland launched automatic number plate recognition system, and practically we got access to it instantly. And this source contained aggregated hourly data on the number of vehicles broken down by traffic direction and vehicle type. And here you can see the location of the traffic sensors, 20 measured points at the European Union's internal border on the territory of Poland. And on the one hand, we have data from border guard at the European Union's external border, and the data from automatic number plate recognition system, what enables monitor of movement of people quite accurately, especially so in this tough time. So how good are the results of this comprehensive research? So please have a look at the bar chart on the right, which shows the share of balance of trade in tourism for transborder areas in GDP. The transborder balance means expenses of foreigners in given country minus expenses of citizens of this country during foreign travel. Believe me that in BOP balance of payments, that is a part of GDP in Poland. So this position in BOP is relatively high. And so I'd like to draw your attention to this slide. So the blue parts illustrate pure share of this balance in economic growth. And so blue shares can be slightly lower or slightly higher when comparing one period to another, but they still sustain, as you can see, the process of economic growth in this analyzed period. So thanks to this model, we were able to estimate transborder balance of trade and its share in economic growth in region breakdown. And so it is some kind of paradox that, as you can see, without positive effects of transborder processes, we would have observed a recession between 2016 and 17 in my region. So looking at these processes from a more general point of view, we focus first of all on cross-border, transborder flows, territorial capital, and quality of life, or with special focus on social capital as well as quality of life. Why do I bring this up? And so through in-depth research, we have identified interesting phenomena in the Polish-Ukrainian cross-border area. Let me say once again that this quality of life is extremely important, because lasting improvement in the quality of life is the overriding objective of sustainable development. And so we adapted in our work general concept from OECD, which consists of 11 dimensions of quality of life. And on the basis of this solution, So we prepared. We got some kind of interesting results. Here you can see 4 latent unobservable variables and partial variables, and so it is interesting that, so in order to, of course, prepare this model, we should conduct household survey in Poland and in Ukraine. So it is especially dedicated to this subjective well-being aspects. So the results of soft modeling show a high similarity between the border areas of Poland and Ukraine, and the fact that quality of life expressed expressed by latent variable improves in analyzed period. This model also reveals the occurrence of well-being paradox, and so especially in the Ukrainian part of this transborder areas. It consists in the fact that, as you can see on this slide, that high values of subjective well-being are contrasted with a low level of synthetic indicators concerning material living conditions and environmental aspect of quality of life. So the spatial location on Moran's scatter plot confirms the specificity of this area. This above figure indicates that households in border area of Poland and Ukraine are characterized by higher level of evaluation of quality of life and are surrounded by neighbors with similar characteristics. So, creating a coherent research system for cross-border or trans-border areas, we have noticed specific behavior of households with regard to private transfers and their impact on the balance of household budget in the Polish-Ukrainian transborder areas. According to some economists, so private transfers play a very important role in political transition period process, when informal links between households created some kind of economy safety net. And as you can see, in a region located to Polish-Ukrainian border, Lviv region, in this region, more than 95% of households participated in various types of transfers. So, in comparison to my region, this Podkarpackie province, Podkarpackie region, this percentage is between 50 and 60%, but just after this transition period, this percent of households participated in various types of transfers was also close to 90%. So the last one slide just before my first part of my presentation is connected with inequalities. I can say that much of our work is also concerned with assessing inequalities in subjective and objective aspects of quality of life. And based on a few indicators, we observe a decrease in income inequalities, as well as decrease in inequalities in terms of subjective income assessment. So, all in all, I can say that So that Statistics Poland for a few years have this coherent research system for transborder, cross-border areas, and now it is extremely useful system for monitoring of movement of people in the context of escalation of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. As I said, this system consists of a few models, including, big data sources, sample surveys, administrative registers, and what is extremely important, additional sample surveys, for example, concerning quality of life. And so we having a close cooperation with statisticians from Ukraine, with the Central Statistical Office in Kiev and the Regional Statistical Office in Lviv, we were able to, conduct common survey, and we are able to get this kind of results. So the next part of my presentation will concern escalation of the conflict, but so according to our establishment, so maybe it's time for some commentaries, remarks of question from audience.
Yes, is there anyone who has a question on the first part of the presentation? Anything you want to discuss, you can just raise your hand or type your question in the chat box. No question at the moment.
If not, maybe so. Just at the end or close to the end of the second part, we'll discuss together. So maybe I know that it is some kind of overlapping parts, and it is some kind of multi-dimensional cube, I can say. Okay.
You can share the second part. Thank you.
Okay, it's time for, as I said, some information, some data concerning escalation of this conflict. Getting to the point, I can say, in time of escalation, we need some modification of statistical surveys, even of our coherent research system. So, and we also need new surveys. It is worth noting that new circumstances create also new possibilities. So, to be honest, I'm a member of mobile network operators working group in Eurostat, and believe me that it is not so easy to get access to data. So I remember also some funny situation when it comes to Belgium, because so a few years ago, Netherlands was a leader of the first project concerning cross-borders or transborder areas in Europe. And Belgium was responsible for data from mobile network operators, and suddenly, so in your country, the access to this data was sort of cut, and so we had some problem with so preparing the final report. But so, as I said, new circumstances create new possibilities. For example, so far we had trouble to get access to data from mobile phones, and we turned to MNO mobile network operators in Poland in the context of the war, treating it as some kind of, in Latin language, it is vis major and force majeure. And unexpectedly, we received some aggregations from them. So paradoxically, the context of the war has made access easier in my country. But so we should try. Let me show you some data on the flow of people and selected characteristics. This slide presents border traffic on the Polish-Ukrainian border. So it is unbelievable, 10 million. We can observe from 24th. We observed this scale of border crossings, and according to data from Border Guard, the scale of crossing was the highest in the first decade of March this year. It is understandable, but did not exceed the level of 2019. So it was the reason why we noticed this huge scale of these processes a long time ago and a few years ago. In other words, so in mid-April, the number of people returning to Ukraine exceed the number leaving Ukraine. It is another one interesting, remark. So, however, as you can see, in August, we can observe the slight increase in the number of, people crossing the border. So, the same data in spatial breakdown. So I have in mind these two regions, Podkarpackie province and Lubelskie province that have a border with Ukraine. And so here you can see the number of refugees according to Border Guard data, that people who declared themselves as refugees crossing the border during customs clearance. So above 2.3 refugees from Ukraine were recorded by Border Guard. And so this bar chart visible shows decreasing tendency in the number of refugees on the Polish-Ukrainian border from April. And so this slide presents that among refugees, women account for more than 70%. That is also understandable. But what is interesting from economic point of view, nearly 55% of refugees can enter the labor market immediately. It is also important because in my country, we have relatively low level of unemployment rate. And so here you can see a spatial breakdown. Of course, regions with the largest urban centers predominate. It is also clear. So, one important corollary of huge scale of migration is additional burden on education system, and most refugee children are in primary schools in both regions. And what is crucial, the educational system in Poland was able to manage this new situation. And another one consequence of increasing scale of refugees is growing exponentially number of firms, businesses in our world. that are set up by Ukrainians in both regions. And so what else? No, the real estate market is also reacting. As you can see, demand for dwellings is growing both in the primary and secondary market as a result of additional demand generated by Ukrainians, of course. So I mentioned about the necessity of comprehensive inventory of data sources in the new circumstances. I don't want to sound trite, but as regards the big data sources, I'd like to stress that the search for new data sources is an endless process. So therefore, we usually start with the inventory of data to find out if there is potential in sources that the statistic does not have access to. And here you can see results of so big data project, Big Data 2. I was the work package leader. I have on the board 8 countries. And so in the framework of this big data project, Big Data 2, we noticed a large scale of asymmetry between countries in tourism statistics, which is of course connected with movement of people. And so all in all, I can say that in many countries, there are still a lot of sources of data without access, which means that we have a lot to do. Sorry for this so simple conclusion. Well, now, but as I said, as I mentioned, maybe it is a perfect time to inventory once again and to try to get access to this maybe identified sources. So just after February 24th, we made some modifications in many surveys conducted by Statistics Poland. Here you can see the list of these surveys. So questions about companies concern the negative effects of the war in Ukraine, for example, decreased revenues, increased costs, disruption of supply chains, etc., etc. So it is, so I think, necessary condition to deal with new situation, some modification, but it is also easy to prepare, and I'm sure that almost all statistical offices in Europe prepared this kind of modifications. But so, as I said earlier, new approach requires also new sample surveys. Among the many new surveys that we are conducting in connection with the new situation, let me mention one that have been completed, finished together with World Health Organization. This survey was preceded by, of course, pilot survey. And so on the left map, you can see reception points where interviewers from the regional statistical office conducted interviews with refugees from Ukraine. During pilot survey, on the right, there are all places where the survey was carried out. And so during the survey, as you can see, interviewers collected 1.8 thousand questionnaires with information on approximately 5,000 persons. And so, of course, here you can see the questionnaire. the first part of this questionnaire was prepared by Statistics Poland. Of course, the second one concerns, this health aspect was prepared by World Health Organization. And this is leaflet from the pilot survey that is available on the website. And so what is crucial, the survey covered all regions in Ukraine. On the map, there is a number of interviewees in each regions in the region in Ukraine. So this slide compares sample survey results and data from register in terms of age structure of refugees. So the slightly higher share of men aged 1834 may reflect, so in our opinion, the gray zone refugees who illegally cross the border, avoiding military service. So I'm just wondering, about the opinion of Liudmyla about, or let me know your opinion about this, this remarks. Do you have add something to this, data and comparison between register and this survey? Do you agree with our, our observation?
Yes, Marek. Yes. I agree with this survey, and in my presentation, I will show my very simple survey in Luxembourg, and I think these numbers will be the same in my survey and in your survey too.
But so, Liudmyla, so we know, living close to the border, that so we can observe here a lot of illegally, incidents when it comes to new situation, and it is the reason why it is not so easy to calculate the number of refugees. So what do you think? I think that you have a similar observation based on your survey, based on some kind of opinions from Ukrainians. But well, another one comparison now between pilot survey and survey of refugees. One can clearly see the difference between the preference regarding plans for staying of refugees who in pilot survey declared moving to various countries of Europe and the world in the first 2 months after escalation. Later, refugees clearly preferred Poland, waiting for some kind of maybe the end of the war. It is another one evidence that they prefer Poland now when it comes to the last 2 months, as the survey indicates. Approximately 90% declared intention to stay in Poland. So what else? Based on the survey of refugees, more than 50% of refugees declared that they wanted to rent an apartment or live in accommodation establishments. So it is connected with the previous one of the previous slides, where I proved that we can observe increasing tendency when it comes to price of dwellings situation of estate market. In terms of our households' involvement in helping refugees, so over 60% provided assistance, and around 1.5% all Polish households sheltered refugees from Ukraine. It is also important. So one slide connected with cooperation with, the World Health Organization. We are going to organize seminar in the next month or December, maybe on December, I'm not sure, concerning the results of our pilot survey and survey as a common, research system. I don't need to remind you of the visible impact of refugees on the labor market, estate market, on the education system. I mentioned about this. We mustn't forget about the healthcare system. So about 3 million refugees means that the healthcare system must be prepared for the structure of diseases of the refugees. It requires an adequate number of hospital beds, nurses, doctors, with appropriate specializations. This is why information on refugee disease is so important. So, as I said, this separate seminar will be dedicated to this problem, this issue. And so the basic and the most important thing is to answer, of course, the question which is directed to the statistics. That is, how many refugees there are in given city, municipality, in given region. How many of them are temporary? How many intend to stay for a longer period of time? So we came to the conclusion, and it is clear that administrative sources are insufficient. I mentioned about this, gray zone, a lot of illegal incidents, etc., etc. For this we need to integrate various data sources, including big data. But so, to be honest, now in Statistics Poland, we are in the middle of preparing some kind of a core register, and so domain area connected with this core register. It is not easy to explain because, as I said, in the middle of some kind of methodological work. But this slide is an attempt to answer this simple question. I mean the number of refugees by integrating several sources. What kind of sources? Statistical data concerning accommodation establishment, administrative data from the national identification number, social insurance institution, border guard registers, and so here you can see, for the example, concerning the number of refugees in a region and in capital cities of these regions. So, well, the last part of my presentation, I'm going to do it very briefly. It's an attempt to answer the question, can refugees from Ukraine significantly change the demographic situation in Poland? So, for this purpose, I will use the PROST model, this pension reform option simulation toolkit. It is deterministic one-year cohort model developed by the World Bank. It is very simple, very easy tool. This model used data on current population, fertility rate, mortality, and migration balance. And so we assume two variants. The two variants differ only in the fertility rate. As you can see, we assume a relatively low level of this fertility rate, because everybody knows that fertility rate to ensure replacement of generation equals 2.1. But we assume in the first variant, as you can see, 1.3, and the second one, 1.4. And so, according to forecasts, thanks to refugees, who will make up 9% of the region's population in 2035, the whole population will remain at more than 2 million in Podkarpackie region. And of course, similar situation is in the framework of the second variant. As you can see, the population will remain at the more than 2 million up to 2040. And so forecasts are more pessimistic for the Lubelskie region, as you can see on these two slides. So although the increase in the number of refugees will cause change in the demographic structure of the two regions, it will not cause the desired increase at the bottom of the age pyramid, which is a little sad, conclusion. And as you can see, so we still observe so-called slim waist, the part, as I said, desirable shape at the bottom of this age pyramid. So let's move to the conclusions. I'm so sorry for the long presentation. So despite the differences, and you can see in potentials in this cross-border, trans-border areas, by the time of COVID pandemic, we observe some kind of convergence tendency between regions located close to the Polish-Ukrainian border. What else? As I mentioned, we also notice this well-being paradox, decreasing inequalities in subjective and objective aspect of quality of life. As I said, once again, let me stress, we observed some kind of convergence tendency. The escalation of the conflict causes necessity for the use of new sources of information, especially big data. Conducting new survey, as I said, is a cliche to some extent, but which means also the need to continuously improve methodological solution in the research system for trans-border areas. In this context, the necessary condition is cooperation between countries. So specification of the most important and exogenous factors affecting the economy and the regional development, standardization of methods. And so generally speaking, creating a uniform information infrastructure, the base of knowledge and trans-border area, comes to the fore. And what is important is the fact that thanks to this system, different stakeholders can make rational decisions on the local, regional, national, and international level what could be overestimated maybe the day after, after the war. And so, believe me, it is the last one slide. From technical point of view, the further integration of new data sources, I stressed that it is an endless process, is an important step. And the first imperative is to develop some kind of prototype of coherent research system with an innovative microservices, universal, unique, in order to real-time data analysis and flash estimates, what is crucial and extremely important in this hard time nowadays. So thank you so much for the possibility to say how far things change in statistics Poland in the context of escalation of the conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Marek, for your presentation. Maybe if it's okay for Liudmyla, I think it's best that you can share your thoughts now, and then after that we can combine all the questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to participate at the seminar. And this is an honor for me, and I want to share my thoughts about refugees from Ukraine. On the one hand, I am a scientist, I'm a researcher, and on the another hand, unfortunately, I'm also part of the refugees who were forced to leave Ukraine, and now we are living in Europe. I have personal experience of all processes, from crossing the border, choosing the country, processing documents, and to simple everyday problems that refugees have. And my speech, it will be maybe inside view to the life of refugees. I will share my screen.
Yes, it's okay. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Okay, according to the website of Statista, 2 countries with the largest number of displaced people from Ukraine are Poland, then Germany, Czech Republic, Italy, Spain, Turkey, United Kingdom, France, Slovakia, and Moldova. I am not talking about Russia because it's hard to divide the number of Ukrainians who were forcibly moved to Russia and people who take their own decision to go to Russia. If we look in percent of population of these countries, we can see that the largest indicator is the Czech Republic. More than 4% of population of Czech Republic are refugees from Ukraine. The next is Poland, 3.35% of the population. Next, Moldova, 3.17% of the population. Slovakia, Germany, Italy, Turkey, Great Britain, Spain, and France have the same level. The first that I want to say is that Ukrainian refugees have a female face, because 93% are women and only 7% are men. These are women who hurriedly left the country with their children, and children are more than 60% of refugees. The main reasons for choosing a country where Ukrainian refugee moved, it was the acquaintances and relatives in this country, 55%, The next is proximity to the border with Ukraine. For example, as Marek said, that, for example, most people who decided to live in Poland chose this country because this country is close to Ukraine, and everybody is waiting that then war will finish soon and they very quickly to come back again to Ukraine. Another criteria of choosing countries is job search opportunities, social benefits. For instance, a set of people who left for Germany chose this country because of attractive condition for refugees, this housing and high level of social benefits. Another criteria for choosing country, the possibility to come only to a certain country. And very important criteria is knowledge of foreign language. I am personally living now in Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, there are 3,756 Ukrainians who received temporary protection documents in Luxembourg, and it is slightly more than 1% of population of Luxembourg. As I'm a statistician, as I'm a researcher, I can't do anything, and I did my own survey around refugees in Luxembourg. I managed to do this because refugees created networks, social networks to communicate with each other, and it helps me to conduct this survey online. 284 people took part in this survey. It's more than 4% of Ukrainians in Luxembourg, and they took part in this survey. Respondents are randomly selected using probability sampling, and therefore the results are not necessarily extrapolated to the all population of refugees of Luxembourg. For example, since the survey was conducted online, it is likely that a younger part of the refugees took part on this survey, more than older part. So, in our Ukrainian community in Luxembourg, in Luxembourg, 89% of respondents are women. Women with different ages, and we see that mostly women are working age, and they can work and they want to work, and only 13% of refugees over than 60 years old. Regarding the level of education, we see that more than half of Ukrainians who now are living in Luxembourg have higher education. This is education from university and post-university education. 27% education is from college, and only 19% have school education. Among people without higher education, 17 study at university now. Regarding their employment status before the war, 76% Ukrainian refugees were employed. 9% were retired, 8% were housewife, 5%, only 5% were unemployed. And where they did employed in Ukraine before war? The main areas of employment was 14% have own small or middle business. 12% was employed in education and science, 5% was employed in healthcare, 10% was employed in financial sector, 10% in beauty sector, 4% in hotels and restaurants, and 7% in IT technologies. Very important for refugees, knowledge of language. What language do speak Ukrainian refugees? In Luxembourg, there are 3 official languages: French, German, Luxembourgish, and Common English. Therefore, we analyzed the level of knowledge of these 4 languages. We see that refugees have high level English. 37% can communicate in English. 4% of Ukrainian refugees have high level German, and 20% can communicate in German. French language, only 1% have high level and can communicate, only 7%. Luxembourgish knowledge doesn't know anybody, and 21% of Ukrainian refugees don't speak any of these 4 languages. So we can see the face of Ukrainian refugee in Luxembourg, and I think it's simple in other countries too. We have mostly women, 89% of refugees. 54% of these women have higher education, and another 17% now are getting higher education. They have practical experience in various spheres of activities, and before war, only 5% were unemployment. What they are doing in Luxembourg? The main feature of Ukrainian refugee is the desire to work. I believe that Ukrainians are changing the stereotype, the refugee in Europe, with their desire to work. The majority of Ukrainians are stubbornly looking for a job. At the same time, if they don't know any of the foreign language, they are ready to work in a different areas, different fields of activity. In Luxembourg now, according to my survey, 24% of Ukrainian refugees already are officially employed. 28% of Ukrainian refugees work in various types of work without official employment. It's mainly cleaning, helping to care for children, to care for animals. About 3%, it's very important, they are volunteers. Volunteers are psychologists, teachers of foreign language who helps Ukrainians to adapt to new conditions. And I want to tell about very interesting program that was offered by University of Luxembourg for Ukrainian scientists. The University of Luxembourg gave the opportunity to about 30 scientists, including me, to receive fellowship and to be visiting researcher at the university for period from 3 until 6 months. In the University of Luxembourg, they created condition for Ukrainian researchers to continue their scientific research and take an active part in the scientific life of the university. When we speak about refugees, we understand that refugees have a lot of problems, and we must say about these problems. And I want to say about the most important problems. And the first most important problem for refugees in Luxembourg, and I think in another countries too, is housing. Each country decided this problem differently, and Marek described how Poland decided this problem. In Luxembourg, housing options are possible. Refugee camp, temporary accommodation in the hotels and hostels, and accommodation with the host families. That's all. Ukrainians who has found work managed to rent their own housing. But housing in Luxembourg is very expensive, so these are really individuals. Even Ukrainian people, refugees, which have official work, can't rent a house for the different reasons. The another problem is the knowledge of foreign language. This problem especially affects the older generation. They can't speak foreign language, they can't study, because younger generation try to study French language, try to improve their English language, level of English, and they can manage with this problem. But older generation can't manage with this problem, and it's a very big problem for refugees. Another problem is psychological problems. Psychological problems with adaptation for new country, for new conditions, and psychological problem with their state after the experience of life during the period of war in Ukraine. We see these problems here, and I think in other countries too, and Ukrainians are still emotionally unstable. And not last, but I think the last of the most important problems is job. I will repeat once again that the vast majority of Ukrainians don't expect to receive social benefits for a long time. They want to work. I see this here, and I heard about this from another countries where refugees live. They want to work. They doesn't want to receive benefits for a long time. They want to work. And finally, we can say, what do Ukrainians think about their future? We understand that issue of the possible demographic crisis in Ukraine in connection with the migration of a large number of Ukrainians is important and urgent now in Ukraine. Because today Europe has created favorable conditions to live for Ukrainians. According to the data of various surveys, and I can confirm this from my experience of surveying Ukrainians here, 85% of respondents plan to return home after the end of the war. 7% don't plan to return at all. Another 4% hesitate, but are still inclined to stay in Europe, and 4% undecided about this point. But 68% of Ukrainians admit that they may stay abroad if the war will continue a long time. This shows that with each month of the war, the number of Ukrainians who will decide to stay in Europe will increase. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Liudmyla, for sharing your experiences and the results also of your survey with Ukrainian refugees in Luxembourg. Are there any questions for Marek or for Liudmyla? You can raise your hand or put them in the chat box.
I can't stop my presentation.
Stop sharing. Maybe I'll try to.
We have a question from Peter.
Yeah, I have a question for Marek first. It's about the survey among refugees he told about. I have a question. How do you guarantee your sample size is representative for the refugee population? Because the population of refugees, as you mentioned, isn't a classical population. It's not 50% men, 50% women.
So it is not, of course, so easy to explain in a short time. So as you probably know, the cooperation in the framework of cooperation with World Health Organization, it is necessary to prepare just before starting this survey. Methodology in minor details. And so if you want, I sent you manual for this sample survey. You know that it is elusive population. It is so-called, I'm a statistician, so in 1 hour I have a lecture in econometrics. And so, as I said, in the literature, we called it as elusive population. And I'm sure that you know that there are a lot of techniques to ensure there's appropriate representative of the sample. And so believe me that paying for this survey, I mean this World Health Organization, we should prepare this appropriate methodology. So, as you probably noticed, I presented during my presentation this reception point. We sampled these reception points. So among a lot of these points in the 2 regions, and of course, in order to keep this regime, methodological regime, and so we are trying to of course pick these refugees every 5, every 10, for example, at the border crossings, and also in, as I said, in these reception points, we tried to keep this methodological regime, as I said. But just so maybe in 5 minutes, I sent you manual for this in English language for this survey, because as you know, it is not so easy because so from methodological point of view, this sampling, the first thing which would be done is stratification, as you know. And the second one, as I said, appropriate sample, etc., etc. And so calibration, comparison with different sources of data is also important in order to prepare this the final estimation of key variables. But so I sent you. So and maybe. If you want, I'm ready to discuss about the details. I manage 300 persons in my office, and I have mathematical division responsible for preparing this, some kind of sample survey. In Poland, the organization of statistics is slightly different in comparison with, for example, this smaller countries, because, for example, in my office, we are responsible for tourism statistics, energy statistics, and cross-border statistics for a whole country. And this is the reason why we are responsible for methodology, for organization, etc., etc. So I sent you. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Marek.
Okay for you, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Please feel free. Yes, I see Noemi.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation of both of you. I just would like to come back to what Marek was telling about the big data and the difficulty to obtain it. I actually do not have any experience with it myself, since I'm very new to this domain. But I happened to follow a course on the acquisition of privately held data, big data, last week. That was organized by the European Statistical Training Program, and it was organized specifically by the Central Bureau of Statistics of the Netherlands.
Is it only Noemi who's out? Yes, I think. I
Not only for
suggest
you.
we wait a few moments. She didn't arrive to her question yet. Don't think she's gonna be back soon. Is there anyone else who has a question? Maybe we can come back later to Noemi.
I have another small question for Liudmyla about educational level in Ukraine. In your survey, you said 45% had a high education of the refugees in Luxembourg within your sample size. How do I compare this with the educational level in Ukraine? Is this higher than the average?
Thank you for the question. Yes, this is absolutely comparable with level education of Ukrainians. Ukrainian people, more than half Ukrainian people have higher education. Yes. Yes.
I wondered if maybe it was higher, and so higher educated people had a bigger chance of leaving the country, but it's the same number. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I hope Naomi is back.
No. I think she went out of the meeting
Not
and
yet.
comes back later.
Maybe I have a question for Marek. Marek, can I ask a question for you?
Yeah, you can ask your question, Liudmyla. Yeah.
Yes. Marek, we know that even before war, Ukrainian people actively moved to Poland for the work. And because many reasons, and the main reason is higher salary in Poland compared in Ukraine. And now we see that a lot of Ukrainians are in Poland, and how many, maybe you did this surveys and many you have this information, how many refugees are officially employed now in Poland, and how did it change the labor market in Poland?
So, Liudmyla, as I said during my presentation, it is not so easy to calculate the number of refugees who are engaged in our labor market, because, as you probably know, this gray zone. According to register, we have approximately 1.5 million refugees. But according to our estimation, is more than 2 million refugees. And a lot of them, especially living close to the border, cross many times the border, and so work maybe not illegally, but temporarily. And so, believe me, looking at the statistics from the border guards, the scale is surprisingly, of crossing the border is surprisingly high. You noticed that this phenomena was observed so just before COVID pandemic. I wonder if you noticed that the scale of movement of people was slightly higher compared to the situation after the war. It is unbelievable, but it is true that we observed this, huge scale of movement of people, not now, but a long time ago. And it is crucial, it was crucial from even national accounts point of view to prepare appropriate coherent research system in order to estimate the scale of expenditures, especially foreigners' expenditures. And I showed, I presented during my presentation that I remember my first presentation during the Statistics Congress in Rio. Transborder processes significant impact on the economic growth. It was unbelievable. It was so tricky to understand that Ukrainians go to Poland and spend a lot of money. People from, relatively poorer country were able to spend a lot of money to Poland. So I think that it is the topic for a dissertation to, to explain in minute details this phenomena, this paradox. And this phenomena encourage us to, to conduct a lot of surveys concerning quality of life. And so, as a consequence, we got this, well-being paradox. Another one, strange, I can say, and weird, conclusions as a result of a comprehensive survey. And I think that we should encourage now a lot of scientists, people from, academic society, together with statistical offices, to undertake new surveys and new research system, because it is extremely important in the context on the war. But coming back to your question, I think that almost 3/4 of this, 2 million, are engaged in our labor market. I think that this is my estimation, including this gray zone.
Thank you, Marek.
Okay, I've seen that Noemi is back. Noemi, will you try again to ask
Yeah,
your
I'll give it
question?
another
Yeah.
shot. So if I
Yes.
fall out, well, we just give up, because it was not really a question. It was just some information that I would like to add with respect to your demand for, yeah, I don't know how far that you could hear me. So with respect to the big data, the privately held data.
Just that you just follow the course. On,
yeah, indeed, that's it. So I just wanted to give you the takeaway messages that I learned there, which can be interesting for you and my colleagues. Well, first of all, something very interesting that I learned there, that the actual law is not at our side. And even now in the, what is it, the European Data Act, that is not definite yet, but it will become definite, I don't know, within the near future. And there, in fact, it's literally written that the acquisition of big data can only be obtained in specific needs. So that's really not good for us, because, well, it's good in a crisis situation, but just for your regular statistics, for the moment, the law is really not accepting a lot. But then they just said, well, you know, it's a really long process to get the private data, the big data. So be prepared to have some years to get these data, and also be prepared to get several no's. Just maintain good relationships with the holders of these data. And then you can already be happy, and maybe somewhere in the future you can get the data. And very important, also work together with the other statistical organizations within your country or across borders. Yeah. And then the last thing was also very important, communicate about what you're doing, because among the population there's a lot of suspicion using big data, using private data. And it's important as a statistical organization, when you're working to use data, that you communicate very open about what you're doing and what your intentions are, so that to avoid situations that they had in the Netherlands. Because they already got really far to use the MNO data, but then at a certain point they got into a media storm and they were really back to zero. So that was just something that I would like to, wanted to communicate with you.
Thank you, Noemi. I don't know if anyone else want to ask something or add something. No one?
So let me share some kind of commentaries to Naomi. I couldn't agree more with your remarks. I mentioned that I'm a member of MNO, this mobile network operators working group in Eurostat. Believe me, that working hard, we are trying to work out some kind of solution in order to get access to mobile data. It is not so easy, because so we prepared 3-4 scenarios, including people from statistical organization who be working in this MNO organization. So it is some kind of, it is a very tough task to get this private data. But as I said, that paradoxically, the context of the war has made may have access easier based on our experiences in Poland. But I'm just wondering, it is only one stream of this big data source, big data, or so they will be deliver us data in more systematic way. I'm not sure, we'll see, but I encourage you to try ask this mobile network operators in the context as I entitled this force majeure, or Wismaier. But what else? In the framework of Big Data 2 project, David Salgado from Spain with his team prepared some kind of simulator. It is a mathematical model instead of data from mobile phone operators. The idea is that gathering or collecting a lot of data from different sources, of course, including big data from automatic number plate recognition system, from smart cities, satellite pictures, etc., etc. It is possible to prepare, as I said, some kind of simulator. But especially in the case of cutting access to data suddenly, what was observed in the project concerning this transborder areas in Belgium. I mentioned about this. So all in all, so the next or interesting path to follow is to solve this on the European Union level and prepare appropriate acts to get access to this data. But as you mentioned, because of the fact that it is private data, it is not so easy. But so we have to prepare a lot of scenarios to deal with this, problem, because especially in the context of this huge scale of refugees, huge scale of migration in Europe. So now our, as I said, imperative of preparing appropriate methodology to combine data from different sources, especially combine data from, big data sources, in order to, prepare this flash estimates and real-time analysis.
Thank you, Marek, for adding. I don't know, Noemi, if you have no more comments on it. Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Question, comments, point of discussion? Not in the chat, no hands. If there are no more questions, I think I can only thank everyone.
Sorry, Caroline, I have a question.
Yeah. Okay.
I was waiting, but thank you for the presentations. What is there in Belgium or in Flanders some organization working for the quality of life measurement of Ukrainians, or but I'm not sure Marek or Liudmyla can answer, but maybe some of our colleagues, I'm not sure. Yes, Ingrid.
Good morning. Well, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. Well, I don't know exactly if there's someone working on the concept of the quality of life in Belgium or in Flanders, but statistical offices, together with other organizations like the foreign offices and Flanders living situations, I don't know how to say that in English, are working together to follow up different aspects of lives of the Ukrainians in Belgium. We work also together with the Plan Bureau, just to monitor all the things that we can monitor, but we use most of the time, we use official data. On the other hand, there are surveys of the United Nations and the OIM that look into quality of lives of the situation of the Ukrainians in Belgium, but it's not very developed yet, I think.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Okay. Someone else? Or was this the last question? No? Then I only can thank everyone for being here, all the input we received. Special thanks to Marek, Cierpial-Wolan and Liudmyla Momotiuk. I'll switch to Dutch again for a minute. Dus inderdaad, bedankt allemaal voor jullie aanwezigheid. Een klein beetje reclame voor ons volgende seminarie nog. Op 17 november dan komen Bart van Rompuy en professor Seppe van den Broeke praten over machine learning, artificiële intelligentie en statistiek. Dus ik hoop jullie dan allemaal daar terug te zien. So thank you very much, Marek, Liudmyla. Maybe you can stay for a few moments so we can have a little talk. En voor alle andere aanwezigen bedankt en tot de volgende keer.
Dankjewel.